Hello and welcome or welcome back to another session in what is our 8th Streaming Media Connect virtual event. I thought it was our 6th earlier today, but turns out it's our 8th. We're going to be back in Huntington Beach for Huntington Beach for Streaming Media West in November. And we're looking forward to seeing people again in person. But I'm also happy to be here doing another virtual event. And we now have 4 events a year, 2 virtual and 2 in person. So that gives more people a chance to attend and more people a chance to speak. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the conference chair for streaming media events, and I'm also the CMO of Ideas. Before we jump in, just a few housekeeping notes. Just for being here, you're entered into a drawing to win an Amazon gift card. We'll announce the winner at the end of each session. You must be present to win. If you have questions for our panel, please enter them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom window. We prefer to see them there rather than in the chat, just because it's easy to get lost if they're in the chat. We will ask the questions, or the moderator will pose the questions to the panelists either during the discussion or at the end. Also, we do have live transcripts turned on. If you want to turn that off, you can go to the bottom of your Zoom window, click on live transcript, and select disable transcript to get those off your screen if you don't want or need to use them. And finally, all of the Streaming Media Connect sessions will be available on demand starting on Monday at youtube.com/streaming video. Steve Nathans-Kelly, our producer, is putting all of these links into the chat, even though I am reading them. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor, Media Silo, who is helping us bring you this entire week's worth of sessions, and we have a video message from them now. And I would also like to thank the sponsor of this session, Theorem. We heard earlier today from Jay Kulkarni in a discussion about the future of ad tech, and Brad Yaun from Theorem will be joining this panel in just a second. We've got a great session coming up here with streaming media contributing editor and super moderator, Nadine Krefetz, leading a discussion about rethinking your OTT workflow. Nadine, that's a big topic to cover in an hour, but we've got just the people for it.
Okay. We're going to talk really fast. So let me have all the panelists turn your cameras on. That way, instead of just going through, we'll just efficiently get everybody on the screen. Excellent. Cool. All right. Now, I guess I should slow down a little bit. Jackie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Donaldson. As you can see from my title, streaming strategy consultant. That just means actually that I recently took the summer off. I most recently was at Disney streaming. I ran ad operations there for our new ad tier that's coming out later this year. And prior to that, I led global product strategy for Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. And before that, I ran all of our partnerships that BAMTech had originally before Disney purchased us.
Okay, wow. All right, I'm going to try to make you guys also do this quickly. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, hi everybody. So as my title suggests, I focus on automation strategy at Theorem. Basically what that means is improving the workflows that we have using both human capabilities and technology.
Cool. All right, Igor.
Hi everyone, I'm Igor from Globo in Brazil. I'm responsible for all the digital platforms that enable the digital products of Globo. And one of these platforms, of course, is the streaming platform. That's why I'm here.
Okay, excellent. Ravi, I promise you I'll get slower in a minute.
I'm Ravi Singh, Director of Streaming Platforms at Knowledge Network. We're British Columbia's public broadcaster. So we're a commercial-free service, probably akin to public television in the US, so PBS. So Happy to be here, and I'm also in charge of all of our digital platforms here at Knowledge Network.
Cool. So we've got Canada and Brazil. All right, Rema, give us a short introduction.
Hi, Nadine. My name is Rema Morgan-Aluko. I'm the VP of Software Engineering. Today, I'm representing Vudu. For those who aren't aware, Vudu is our transactional video streaming on-demand platform. We have over 200,000 movies and TV shows available to rent, and we have lots of titles that other subscription services don't. And we also have the largest 4K library, which we will get into later.
Okay,
Nice to meet everyone.
Now, you know, one of the things I'm going to assume is that this panel is called Rethinking Your OTT Workflow. But essentially, I'm pretty sure you guys are always rethinking your OTT workflow. But today, I want to focus on what you're rethinking. So, you know, we've got workflows, but why don't we cover what the main driver is for each of you for the rethink? So, Igor, why don't we start off with you? Like, what have you been rethinking?
Yeah, so if I was to list the motivators to rethink the workflow, I'll put three into perspective. The first one is always economics, right? You always have to be more efficient and less expensive in the end of the day. The second driver I would put is time to market as well, because oftentimes you have to launch a new product or a new feature of your service, and you have to think about what you have to do to launch that in time. And for me, it's especially complicated because we have events like the World Cup and the Olympics and elections, dates that won't change no matter if I'm ready or not, right? And of course, the third one is the customer experience, right? We are always thinking about new devices, new ways to consume content, new ways to improve the experience of our customers, and that's also a big driver for our thought process in the end of the day.
Now, when we were talking in the planning call, we talked about two different things that you were thinking about specifically. One was running your own CDN, and the second was moving to the cloud. So if you had to pick one, which one would you pick?
I would say that running my own CDN is top priority right now. It's one thing that we have been investing a lot of our time and our resources on. Okay,
so we've got one, running your own CDN. Jackie, what kind of things are you thinking about when you come to the most important thing within the workflows that you are exposed to?
So within Disney and Disney Plus specifically, everybody's heard that we're launching an ad tier in Disney Plus by the end of the year. And so what that means is there's a huge lift in terms of identity and identifying the user. And of course, we have a global platform. So understanding the regulation around ad serving in various different regions and how to differentiate a user. So the existing Disney Plus environment is simply a kid's profile and then everybody else. But because of the regulations here in the US and quite frankly, in other regions, it's even stricter, we have to find a workflow that identifies the age of the participants so that we're serving the correct ads and abiding by the laws in every region. So that really required us to rethink our entire identity and user workflow from the beginning to end.
So does that mean that you have younger kids and older kids as well?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So for example, COPA here in the US does have regulations around kids that are 13 and younger. And specifically, that means that you cannot share any of their data. And the problem with that is a lot of advertisers, of course, they don't want to produce ads that does not provide them with the data share information. So it's really a new model on how you approach the advertisers in the market. And also, you know, Disney is a very family-friendly environment. We want to make sure that our users are protected and that they're not seeing any advertising that does not meet both the regulatory, but also our own internal standards of ethics for users that we would consider to be children, which is
Okay.
13.
All right, we'll get a little bit more into that in a bit because I know both you and especially Igor had some things to say about that. Ravi, how about you? What part of your workflow have you been kind of focused on recently?
So, I mean, I can share a lot of the same sentiments that Igor talked about. Of course, we're really dedicated to bringing the best experiences to our audiences, as well as, with technology changing in platforms, we're available on actually a number of platforms on both of our brands. But one of the things that, as a public service broadcaster, that we have to consider is issues around accessibility. So we have to be 100% accessible. So our federally licensed body in Canada is called the CRTC, and they mandate us, for example, to have 100% closed captioning available on air as well as online. And we've recently made big moves into described video. I think in the US it's called something slightly differently, but basically it's for people who are visually impaired, that the narrative of a program is completely changed to describe what's happening in the scene. So part of our workflow has been really looking at least most recently, at accessibility.
Okay, all right. Rema, how about you? You've got some news from what you've been doing.
Yeah, so Fandango recently acquired Vudu in 2020. And so what we've been looking at is how do we transform our platform and kind of move it into the cloud. So from an engineer's perspective, we're looking at things like how can we increase the quality and the speed in which we can kind of encode our videos. Are there systems that we may have from other things that we have that can streamline? A lot of times when you acquire new software and new tooling, you have to kind of look at what do you keep, what do you throw out? Is there something that you may want to buy in order to kind of improve your processes and your systems? And so one of the things that we have just been trying to always think about is how do we use our existing services, systems to maintain, this high quality viewing experience. I mentioned earlier that for Vudu, we have, the largest 4K library, and we want to make sure that our customers know that, and we continue to maintain that quality of content. So, how do we handle that? And what do we do for big titles? Like, for example, we've got Top Gun, Maverick that's come out, and that's a big title, lots of action. So what can we, when we're thinking about our encoding pipeline, how do we ensure that every frame and every scene as crisp as, what the user is seeing if they were in theaters potentially? And so those are some of the things that we think about when we're thinking about workflow.
In fact, we've covered some very interesting points. And, for Brad, the question's a little different, but, for you, when you're working with your customers, is there a common thing that kind of bubbles to the top that is the workflow part that you are looking at?
Yeah, so if we talk about, Theorem's workflow, where Theorem comes in, it's when media is sold, right? So media is sold, we get that insertion order, that ad campaign needs to be run, it needs to be delivered, optimized, and then obviously the end of performance of that reported on. And for many organizations, we're really blessed with these technology platforms that have a lot of existing capabilities in them to automate data flows, and to an extent, some various API connections to different platforms, but there's a limitation there, right? So when we talk about rethinking our workflow, we want to deliver that value to our clients. And the way we do this is by pairing the existing capabilities of tools like Google DV360, like Trade Desk, like Salesforce, with our own internal automation solutions that we've built. Right now, a big process-oriented one is with robotic process automation. It's very efficient at passing a lot of structured data to and from various systems. And what that allows us to do is to scale that revenue recognition for a client without also scaling the headcount that is typically, really cumbersome when you're talking about deploying these very large campaigns or sizable multiple campaigns for a given client. There's a team associated with understanding the intricacies of each client. We're able to use automation to actually customize those process specific workflows for those clients.
So when you're talking about the structured data, what's the biggest use of structured data?
Well, anytime we're talking about structured data, especially in an insertion order, as that's coming in, we've been given all of the details. Where's that ad? Is it a targeted ad? Is there a specific region or an age group? It could be structured in the sense of what type of creative file. Is it an MP4? Is it a JPEG? So all sorts of these fields, right? They're very structured. Now, the real challenge is how do you pair technologies together like RPA and different machine learning capabilities when things become unstructured. That's an advancement that a lot of organizations are getting into, and it's solving a lot of problems associated with the ability of a person to be sitting actively in the middle of a workflow and use their own human judgment to say, this doesn't look right, or we need to do this instead. And that's where those algorithms help to replicate the intelligence of a person and to help make what's unstructured structured, so that tools like RPA can actually do what they're intended to do, which is very rules-based processes to deliver these campaigns through to completion.
Okay, all right, we'll get back to that too in a second. And, when I think about the speakers here, we've got a range of different business models, and I'm going to assume that your business model drove your latest OTT kind of workflow upgrade. Would that be accurate? And if so, I'll start off maybe with Jackie. What obviously for you, you're kind of an easier example because you're working in advertising, you need an advertising workflow. I mean, but in your case, you mentioned that there was a lot of people involved in this in terms of how you evaluated and basically kind of got things going. So can you give us a little bit of background without, going into any of your confidential information, but who was involved in getting this workflow up and running?
Well, it involved, you're exactly right. It involved a lot more people. There's a few factors for that. That's because obviously Disney Plus is an international platform now. So all of the different regions and the regulations within those regions and the workflows had to be accounted for upfront. But also because we're getting now into the advertising space, and before it was, subscription-based only, now we have to consult the larger Disney organization on what its brand regulations are around advertising. For example, junk food is a good example. And then we also had to leverage other parts of the organization from a technology perspective. And, what it meant was that various different parts of the organization within Disney and even within DMED that we hadn't previously worked a lot with, now we had to work very closely with to make sure that whatever advertising workflows we were putting in place weren't in conflict with any other part of the organization and its stance on advertising. We also decided to leverage our own internal technologies, at least within the US, in terms of ad serving itself. So that required us to build out an entire platform to provide that advertising into the content. So
you also mentioned legal and product and
we had legal and product and tech and marketing and and then of course we already have massive partnerships with advertisers, right, with other parts of our organization. So working with our advertisers to make sure what we were building is something they want to buy, right? And thankfully that was hugely successful. But taking on an endeavor like this, standing up essentially a new platform in a very short period of time was a massive undertaking, for sure.
And I think it's interesting to know about how many people were involved in your development of the new product, I should say. Now, I don't know, is that always the case? I mean, you know, when I think about some of the other media speakers here, you know, Rema, for instance, when you were looking at your latest workflow improvement in terms of bringing Vudu in, bringing the high quality content in, are you working with a lot of different departments, or is it mostly focused on engineering? Kind of what's the work process behind the work process?
Yeah. I mean, so we work with a lot of different departments, right? There's a lot of people who are responsible for making sure that our customers, you know, get that best in class experience. And so, yeah, I mean, we work with our legal team, our content operations team. Our legal team ensures that we have, you know, all the right licenses from all the different studios, you know, because we have content from all over. Our content operations team, who's responsible for ingesting the content from studios, doing quality controls. Someone mentioned, you know, captions earlier. Do we have captions for all of our video, both short form and long form? Do we have multi-audio tracks and audio descriptions as part of that? We work with our marketing teams, and even, you know, in the broader Fandango umbrella, we've got Rotten Tomatoes and Fandango. Rotten Tomatoes will partner with Rotten Tomatoes to ensure that, you know, customers get curated recommendations on our platform, you know, so that they can kind of view and understand that we have titles that may not be available on subscription services. And so what does, from an engineering perspective, when we partner with them, what does that tooling look like? How do we make it so that those recommendations and those curated lists and different things are front and center to the consumer? And then on the engineering side, you know, our content is available across all of the different devices. So we're a transactional service. So that means people are owning this content. It's there for them to watch all the time at whatever platform they have, whatever device they have. And so, you know, all of our teams that build apps for Roku, let's say, or on our mobile platforms or Android TV or tvOS, you know, we want to make sure that what we're delivering looks just as good on a phone as it does on your large, you know, TV and has great quality. So it is a collective of people that work together to ensure that, you know, our customers have like this best in class experience. It's definitely not all in engineering. There's no way we can do it all, you know, by ourselves here, but there's a ton of people involved in making sure that all these things go well.
Now, so Rema has the opportunities and benefits of a really large company, and I'm just going to go to Ravi next, who's with a smaller public broadcaster. And you know, Ravi, you talked about kind of the public broadcaster mandate, but what did you look at when you thought about your technology upgrades? Because you obviously, unfortunately or fortunately, do not have the huge staff that Rema has.
Yeah, so I think, and I'll actually go back to what Igor said. It's interesting that they, you know, that Globo, you know, runs their own CDN. I don't think we could even possibly imagine doing that with the size of our team. But you know, our technology considerations are really have to scale to, you know, what we can, of course, afford. So we're a donor-supported service along with a government grant that we do get to operate annually. So we actually found going to the cloud, for example, as being really the option that would work for us. So we still have to continue, you know, developing and growing, but we can't do that with the limited staff that we have internally. So our partners for us, for example, are really important. So I can say this because we're not a publicly traded company, but we work with JW. So we're JW Player, which runs many of our websites and applications. And we pay really close attention to what their roadmap is, because they often inform, how we're going to move forward.
Okay. All right. So different business model, different way of looking at things. Ravi went to a partner for, some of the things that they couldn't do. Igor, you went and did it yourself. So tell us a little bit about Globo's business model in this case and why you went and did it yourself.
Sure. So Globo is also a broadcaster here in Brazil. It's actually one of the larger ones in the world. And the business model of a traditional broadcaster is based on advertising, right? Free-to-air television, you run ads to pay for your bills. When we started the switch to digital, we created a bunch of digital products. So Globo has a huge digital portfolio, and we have different business models for each digital product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have an SVOD product, which is Globo Play. It's our streaming platform. Where you go subscribe is very similar to what you see in traditional streaming platforms, with the added complexity that we run a lot of live channels on that, because we are also television broadcaster, right? So we have live programming and streaming, not only VOD. And we also have other properties, other products on our portfolio that are purely ad supported, both for display ads and also video ads, right? So we have to deal with the complexity of everything in order to attain to our business goals. Why we decided to create our own CDN, that was kind of something that we figured out as the SVOD product grew, right? So we started with the SVOD product, I think in 2018, 2017. And when the product started to grow, we saw that the CDN bill was getting very high, very fast, because the engagement went through the roof. Users really engaged with our content, and the bill got very steep. And we started to think about possibilities and alternatives, right? So Globo as a broadcaster has an advantage because we own a lot of locations around the country with data center like structure, right? Data center like infrastructure. So redundant power supply, redundant air conditioning, secure rooms and everything. So
and that's because you're a broadcaster, essentially.
Yeah,
first,
I have to put
a broadcaster
antennas,
first.
right? I have to put antennas out
Mm-hmm.
in order to get the feed to the people. So what we did is to leverage on that existing infrastructure, which is essentially a sunken cost, right? And add servers to build our CDN. We have 127 different locations in Brazil with that kind of infrastructure, and we selected a few, and we started building out our CDN back in 2019. And today we have over 140 points of presence spread around the country. And we basically only have contracts with commercial CDNs today for disaster recovery or some specific offloading of regions that we don't have a lot of capacity, because all these data centers are in different sizes and different shapes, right? So there are places that I have 20 servers, there are places that I have 4 servers, depending on the demand of that region and also on the shape of the internet traffic in Brazil, right? And
okay.
we were able to put a big impact on the business plan of the product by doing that, because we actually reduced it and saved millions and millions of dollars in CDN costs alone.
So it's interesting because all of you come from very different business models to a certain extent, and even though there's some crossover, the way it's kind of guided your workflow is kind of a very specific to the business model, I'll say. And I know that when we talked about kind of in our planning meeting, what your business workflows were like and what your technology workflows were like, there was a few things that kind of were in common, but instead of kind of following, a script per business model, why don't we just open it up and see what kinds of questions you all have for each other? I mean, because when I hear you all talk, there's some commonalities I think of, but Brad, is there something that you can think of that you would ask one of these people about what they're doing in their workflow?
Yeah, I would be specifically interested, Rema and Igor, just with the size of what you're dealing with, right? So, at Theorem, cloud is really critical because it allows us to do two things really well. One, we can stand up environments and we can customize those specific to each client, even though we're using a lot of web-based company technologies like DV360 and Trade Desk, as I mentioned. But the other thing is we can customize the specific workflows within each of those. So we've essentially been able to scale and deploy this out to clients quickly. We've made that choice because of the affordability of cloud and the rising costs of physical servers. So for Igor, what are some of the big challenges that you found when you're talking about the data centers, the servers, and that sort of scalability with basically the last 2 years and the rising costs of chips and technologies that are required in the supply chain to support that?
Yeah, basically the model that I created when we started doing the CDN is based on OPEX. It's not based on CAPEX. So since it's a large number of servers that we require, we went ahead and we spoke with the hardware vendors, and we got deals to lease the servers instead of buying them, and that helps offset the cost a lot, and also reduces the need for upfront investment. Right, I don't have to pay for the server in full and wait for that to depreciate over a period of time. So I just pay a monthly fee for each server, and I have some flexibility on upgrading and reducing the number of servers that I need, right? And that's something that worked really well for us, because in the end of the day, Brad, the higher cost to maintain an infrastructure like that is not the servers. And servers are cheap, right? Our higher cost in the end of the day, if we didn't have the antennas spread around the country, would be the housing of those servers. There are cities where other streaming companies approached us and said, how do you have a pod in that city? Because it's impossible to have infrastructure there. And I say, yeah, look at the antennas.
Well, you are in the position of having the physical environments that other people don't have.
And it's a sunken cost in the end of the day, because I cannot switch off the antennas, and it's already there, right? Mm-hmm. No matter if I'm using it or not.
Interesting. Okay. And Brad, the question for Rema, can you just restate it a little bit so we can try to capture?
Very similar question with cloud and cloud deployment and the speed that they found at achieving, what they're trying to do with these different platforms and how cloud is supporting that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. So we have multiple different workflows for a couple different areas, but I'll just simplify and just talk about two right now. So one workflow that we have is specifically for our short form content, our trailers. So our Rotten Tomatoes brand has the largest trailer network on YouTube today. Whenever you watch a trailer, chances are you're watching us, one of our trailers. And so for us, speed is critical. It is very important for us to get the trailer up first and foremost. That's the person who gets the ads, whoever has the trailer up first. And so speed is critical. So we leverage both internal tooling based in the cloud and an encoding pipeline specifically built within the cloud that is optimized for speed. It is a lot faster to kind of encode short form content than obviously long form as well. But we want to also make sure that we are enriching that trailer with lots of interesting metadata so that can be surfaced up in search and also can be used on our O&O platforms as well. And so that pipeline is completely separated from our long form where quality is is kind of first and foremost and first class there. And with our Vudu platform, that is actually on premise. And so we're working on moving that and transitioning that into the cloud, so that we can take advantage of some of the speed, storage, the archival systems and different things. Because right now we're maintaining this huge library, on, racks within our on-prem data store, and the cost of storage has gone way down, right? And so can we save on operational costs instead of having a person, at the data center, like managing things for us? But can we leverage the cloud to do so? And that's something we've done in the past with our previous platforms. And so we're pushing that. But we have best in class workflows for our trailers platform, using Amazon services to make that happen.
Now, Rema, you also mentioned earlier in our previous call about the consolidation of the workflows from the different offerings that you had. Do you want to touch on that just briefly, since it gives you the opportunity right now?
So previously, we ran another home entertainment platform called Fandango now that we have since sunset, and that platform was completely cloud native. And so we're using those models and thought processes to kind of improve our Vudu platform, to kind of help us get into the cloud. So using those similar models. And we're also looking at that encoding pipeline that we had that's no longer in use today, but we're going to resurrect it. We're going to bring it back and help us kind of get both speed and quality on our encoding pipeline. And maybe there's a way to actually, in order to kind of improve costs, it depends, we're still evaluating. Okay. Can we bring our short form and long form systems together? Are there any synergies or cost savings that we can get that way? We actually also, as part of our movie clips system, we actually use long form content from Vudu, and we cut up these interesting, memorable moments about films, and we cut from the long form and build these short form clips that we also make available with YouTube. And so that's one area where our systems are converging, but there's tons of things that we still need to look at and still need to evaluate in order to make sure that, we're leveraging kind of all of the tools that we have at our disposal. I mean, like Vudu has 60 million customers right now. And so that's a lot. And it's also a lot of content that we're trying to manage. And so anything that we can do to improve costs, to speed, to reduce the number of hands that have to actually be involved to touch things is what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, all right. Igor, you had something you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I'm curious to ask Ravi about the challenges, and if that's the case with him, about closed caption in multilingual content, right? We have in Brazil, Brazilian Portuguese is our main language, and we also have a lot of titles that we license from abroad, and that comes into multiple different languages, right? So French, English, mainly English, but we also have a lot of French and Spanish content. So do you have this challenge, Ravi, and how do you handle that?
So in terms of our broadcast license, we're actually only required to close caption or provide subtitles in English. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be where we necessarily stop. Of course, in British Columbia, there's many different people from many different cultures that live here. So it's likely something that we're going to have to look at as an organization going forward. I think for us, and I had been talking to you guys about in our previous session, was around the costs that entail sort of a venture of looking at as closed captioning and described video. Is we have to, because of our accessibility mandate, we have to be incredibly sensitive about accuracy. So we can't use artificial intelligence, for example, to generate closed captions or described video, and actually have to use a third-party organization to help us with that. So Right now, we don't have to deal with the multilingual language issues, but I'm sure that's something that, in the next 5 years, we're going to have to look at.
There was a question that came in from the audience, and I'm trying to incorporate some audience questions, but we also obviously have things we discussed previously. And the question was about live versus on-demand content. But Igor, are you looking at live content that you want to transcribe and translate into multiple languages and subtitle it?
Yeah, we are looking both live and VOD.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge with live is a bit bigger in the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we are looking into that. When you have multiple channels, we're not a single channel network. We have over 45 different channels, linear channels. Most of those channels have live content on it, so it's always a very hard task to accomplish.
Okay. Now, and in terms of live content, I'm going to gather that Jackie, did Disney Plus have live content?
Disney Plus did not have live content.
Okay.
But that is definitely something that we're looking at going down the road.
Okay.
For sure, as we expand, because of course, as part of Disney, you have, a lot of other companies, a lot of other segments that actually do have live content.
Right.
And of course, ESPN Plus, has live content. And obviously Disney has several linear channels that are out there today. So that's definitely something that we would look at in the future. I think our focus was to first get international as fast as we could, with a quality product that was a product that was applicable to anybody, no matter what your age.
Okay.
And I think that goal was accomplished. Then the next goal is the ad tier, and doing that right. And I think also we are also studying, as Ravi has indicated, a lot of the accessibility issues that are out there today. And we are evaluating where and when those will happen. One of the things we've struggled with, quite frankly, in all of this, in terms of our global product strategy and what to do when, is the regulatory changes that are happening so quickly, it seems. Here in the US, even state by state, but internationally as well, there are extreme data privacy laws that are going into place. And I mean, we've struggled with that quite extensively, just trying to keep up with them. I wonder if any of the other panelists have had similar problems. It feels like they're just coming in from everywhere, and just trying to keep up with those. Our poor lawyers, I mean, they don't sleep, I don't think.
Now in terms of data privacy, it's almost a whole nother panel, just because it's such a big topic. We have so many different questions coming in, and they're all coming in at the same time. You guys are very interactive, both you and the audience. I'm just going to try to put the privacy thing on the shelf for now.
Sure.
I apologize, just to get to a couple of the other topics.
It's probably a rabbit hole anyway. So.
Okay, Ravi, you had a question. What did you want to chat about?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask my fellow panelists, what specific platform are you guys seeing the most growth on? Of course, for the ones who can actually share that with us.
I'm going to say one of you. Okay, Igor. Great.
Yeah, I can start. So here in Brazil, the connected television sets are wildly popular. 60% of our viewing time today is on connected television sets, and we have seen a steady growth on that platforms, right? And that brings a lot of issues to the table, even if you're talking about accessibility, because some brands don't have support for voiceover. So you cannot navigate the app using VoiceOver or some similar text, right? And that's just to begin the story of how difficult it is to navigate in that fragmented world. You have over 50 different brands of connected television sets where Globoplay is available today.
Okay, that's a huge, and not only is it huge, but I mean, everybody else here also is supporting a lot of different environments. And, you know, in order to do that well, you know, I guess one of the things I think about is there something that you have to rely on in your workflow that's more important so that you can support everything than anything else? This is a question we hadn't planned for, so it's off the top of my head. Oh, please. Okay. So,
well, I mean, okay, so I can, you know, the interesting thing, you know, when you're looking at supporting, because I mentioned earlier, you know, we're across a multitude of different devices, right? And from a tech perspective, what you don't want to have to do is maintain several different code bases that you cannot maintain, right, over time. We have the luxury of being, you know, one of the larger groups on this call, but you know, there's still a limit to the number of resources you have to support all the multitude of platforms. So, you know, what can you do to kind of streamline, right? So your services and your API layer definitely, you know, is a big help, right? Because that's shared amongst across your different platforms. And so when you're kind of designing, you want to, you know, see if it's possible to kind of maintain the same feature sets across these different platforms. And so you're not reinventing the wheel every time. And also from a consumer perspective, they like to be able to switch between different platforms, and features that they have available on one platform, they would expect it on the next. And so, you know, you can, from a product perspective and just thinking about features, you want to maintain the same features across. You want to leverage those same APIs across so that, you know, it works the same way everywhere. That will save you some time on QA and testing. There's still going to be some specifics that are going to be down to the platform, that there's really not much you can do other than kind of decide if, like, you're going to have a team for this, or you're going to outsource this development to maybe, you know, a company that has more expertise. For example, you know, we have a large presence on Roku, and that is a very specific type of programming language that not everybody has internally. We do, but that's not something that everyone has available to them. So maybe that's something you outsource, and that's something you're thinking about. And so, you know, I think that when you're looking at kind of just broadly, you know, also just look at your content, understand your particular business and what makes the most sense, especially if you're a smaller company and you can't afford to have an in-house staff kind of focus on all these different platforms. You know, what's, you know, where's your audience today? You know, are you looking at that data and figuring out where are your customers actually leveraging it, and make some decisions about what you can afford to have internal versus outsource, or even no support at all. You don't necessarily need to be on every single platform. Of course, customers always think of that, but you know, you can only maintain what you can afford to maintain, right? And you can try your best to take shortcuts and outsource and share technology, but if you focus on your main platforms and put your all into that, you can definitely be successful in kind of maintaining certain things. When it comes to mobile, you can take your iOS code base and your Android code base, and you can actually do slight tweaks on that and make that same code base work for tvOS and work for Android TV. There's some savings there. I think it just kind of depends on which platforms you want to support, and which ones you're putting aside to another team.
Okay. Brad, you had a question?
No, I had a response to that question that you asked. It was a great one. I think when we're talking about the workflow and thinking about where we place our time and energy and how we can optimize the workflow around that, going back to the Theorem example, right? Delivering ads. That is the goal, is to put quality ad content in front of users. So how does that look? What is that experience for them, and how are they receiving that? So the QA process is really critical, especially when we're talking about social. TikTok, huge. And then you move over to a different platform, and all of a sudden landscape versus portrait and some of the quality concerns with deploying these ads. So how do we approach that? Well, find the areas, as I previously said, where things are very structured, and we might be able to get away with using advanced, algorithms that can add some human judgment. But even that machine-based human judgment can't replace the human experience, and really QAing the human experience of how does this look to me as a user? Does this look right? That's the ultimate importance. And I think that's one way that Theorem specifically is doing that, is freeing up our human team members to be in areas of work that are more meaningful to clients and that are more meaningful to the product that that client has tasked us with delivering through to completion.
Okay, now, Igor, you've got, I'm going to go with too many things to QA manually, or what?
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on that. So TV sets are especially difficult to automate, right? When you're doing QA, oftentimes you have to rely on manual testing. And what we have been doing is developing a couple of partners, companies that are willing to help us automate that workflow, right? And we have been mildly successful in doing that. And I mean, that helps offload a lot of costs and a lot of, and get a lot of problems early on as well, right? So we have a couple of companies that are helping us to automate the testing of the TV sets apps. And that's something that we are working on right now. And another thing that was a comment that Rema made, and it's a hard decision that we oftentimes have to make, is that we are phasing out older devices a lot as well. Every month, let's say we phase out like older television sets, like earlier than 2015, we don't support it anymore because they don't have the performance requirements just to run the app and to have a good user experience. And we are offsetting devices every month at the end of the day, because we have to maintain a single code base is nice when it's possible, right, Rema?
Now, I was going to go to Jackie next if she had something, but I do if Jackie doesn't. Jackie, is there something that you want to talk about?
Well, just to add to what they were talking about, one of the things that we also had to design along the lines of what Rema said with the API is an ADK for our B2B2C partners. And we had to be really thoughtful about that in terms of the regional differences between set-top boxes and all those complications. And with the idea of, again, like you said, Rema, our customers expect a similar experience on the various different devices. And further to that, we had to pass up on some partnerships that couldn't properly integrate with the ADK in order to be providing that level of quality and service.
Can you give us a little background on how the ADK works, just because not everybody here may know?
Yeah, sure. So the ADK is essentially a much more sophisticated API that allows your B2B2C partners to integrate with your app.
Okay.
And essentially think of it as like the code base for Disney Plus being provided to a B2B2C partner who then has to integrate with that ADK. So you build that yourself, and it's got the standards and regulations and the quality and the features that you want available to the customer. So that was another big surprise, is that, depending on which partners you were dealing with, depending on what region you were in, it was sometimes difficult to get those integrations done effectively. We have done the same thing that Igor mentioned as well, and we've deprecated old platforms, old TVs, smart TVs, that kind of thing. And the reason we did it was also, besides the fact that you can't possibly manage all these platforms, quite frankly, some of these old platforms, the feature set that you have today won't function. So really what you're doing is you're setting your consumer up for failure, and that's definitely not what you want to do. But I would like to see at some point, it's not there for our industry right now, but I would like to see a regulatory body similar to what they have for CDNs that gets together and we all decide, you know, what the standards is going to be. I think Rema mentioned Roku. Roku is kind of an extreme example in terms of all of the builds that you have to do to stay current with their code. And it can be painful. And, you know, that is an entirely different build. So for us, we built Disney Plus, you know, hundreds of times with this various different code base. And now that we're doing ad tier, we're going to have to do it all over again. So you really have to build a workflow internally where you have a degree of control of how those integrations are formed and what is going to be your minimum viable feature set that you must provide to these consumers.
I mean, that sounds to me off the top of my head as a leadership role for engineering. Is it?
I think it's a combination. It's engineering. I mean, at least for us at Disney, it was engineering, it was product, it was legal, all coming together to say, this is what the market is looking for. This is what we think we can do. These are what our partners need. We have an entire B2B2C team that only thinks about those partners 24/7. And our technical program managers that manage those integrations. So it's a bit of a dance, you know, with all of those team members involved. And to make sure that at the end of the day, nobody leaves the table angry. So, you know, because of course the product people want everything, the moon and the stars, and then engineering is saying, well, okay, but like, then I need 500 more people. So there's a little bit of a balance, and that was my key role in my job at Disney, was managing that balance between the teams.
Okay, it sounds interesting. Now we have 2 minutes left. I've got a lot of audience questions, but we had a format, and I want to ask the panelists if they have anything else they'd like to wrap up with first, just because this isn't, you often aren't in the same location, even if it's virtual, together. So is there anything that you each wanted to say before we go? And we have only 2 minutes, which means you have 20 seconds each.
I just want to piggyback on Jackie's last point about it being, you know, a dance amongst all of us. You know, in order to make these services, you know, I've been talking a lot about Vudu, but for all of us here, you know, we're all nodding our heads, you know, as she was saying what she was saying. It is a collaboration between multiple roles and multiple departments to make sure that we are ensuring that our customers have a best-in-class service, whatever that looks like. Some of these decisions, you know, I know there's some business folks on the call. It is important to have those conversations with your technology staff so that they can help you design something that will make sense for the next iterations of where you want to go. They are not just builders, you know, they're strategists just like you, right? So have those conversations together, and then together you can build, you know, an amazing service like we've done at Vudu.
And, you know, one of the things I think of is, like I said, because you all come from different business models, it's very interesting, but it sounds like there's a lot of consistent thought processes that go into this. And that to me is kind of reassuring. It's reassuring that you all have kind of taken some time to think about this. We are actually out of time. I'm so sorry I can't give you more time because Eric's going to cut me off. And he routinely gives me like the quick get on with it thing. So sorry. Thank you all for coming.
Description. It's one of the unfortunate parts of the conference chair job description. But anyway, that was a great discussion. As always, we could have gone on for much longer. Thanks everyone for taking the time today. Thanks Nadine for doing such a great job moderating. Our Amazon gift card winner is Ashok Naidu. I'm guessing I didn't pronounce that right, but I tried. Keep an eye out on your email next week for more information about that. Thanks again to Theorem for sponsoring this panel, and to Media Silo for sponsoring all of Streaming Media Connect. Our next session is coming up at 5:30 Eastern with Chris Paff leading a discussion that is provocatively titled SVOD, It's Not Dead Yet. Break out your Monty Python and the Holy Grail bits if you get the reference. We'll see you then. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.